Welcome to Cut the Crop, keeping you in the know about everything you grow. Researchers, growers and other interesting folk delivering insights and information on topics ranging from agronomy to profitability. Brought to you by the Foundation for Arable Research.
Hello and welcome. My name's Alison Stewart and I'm your host of this session of Cut the Crop. And today we are welcoming Livia Esterhazy. Hello, Livia. Nice to have
Alison.
You here. Yeah, so I'll call you Liv because that's how I know you.
Absolutely.
So you're the program director for A Lighter Touch. Now, a lot of our growers will have heard about A Lighter Touch from the far perspective, because obviously we've had Joe Drummond talking about the work that we're doing as part of A Lighter Touch. But I thought today it would be a good idea to actually talk about the program as a whole, the bigger program, because obviously we're just one small component of it. So why don't we just start off with you giving us a little bit of a background to what A Lighter Touch is and how long it's going to last for and how many partners are involved and what we're trying to achieve.
Sure. I'll give you the lowdown on it. So A Lighter Touch is a program that combines 16 of New Zealand's plant-based food producers, so including horticulture, obviously arable and wine, and together finding ways to grow food with that lighter environmental touch. So what that means is helping to reduce the hard chemicals used in pest and disease management and working towards using softer chemicals, biopesticides, biologicals and beneficials, just to name a few. The program is actually co-funded with the Ministry of Primary Industries and actually was one of the very first S4EP24 programs back in 2020 when it got started, which is fantastic. And it's actually a $27 million 7-year program. So we are just halfway through the program now. And what we're trying to do is obviously empower all our growers with the best skills, tools, techniques, and smarts to solve those crop pest and disease problems and future-proof our growers' businesses. Because we really do want New Zealand growers to be the world's preferred plant-based food producers. So yeah, there's a lot of work there. And the partners that you were talking about, Alison, all 16 of them, they range from large product groups such as FAR, obviously, and Zespri, to much smaller associations like Boysenberry, who have 20 commercial growers, and New Zealand Persimmon. We've got 30, and indoor crops like tomatoes. We've also got onions. There's a whole raft of them. But yeah, from big to small. And we also have crop protection companies, including Corteva and Syngenta, who've joined us on this fabulous journey to reducing those hard chemicals, basically, on crops across New Zealand. So it's a pretty wide and varying program, but with one very clear vision.
Excellent. So, our growers know that, we've been involved primarily in two main areas. We do a lot of work on developing fungicide resistance management packages particularly for our cereal crops. And then we've also been in A Lighter Touch, we've been looking at new biopesticides, biological products that could be integrated into like an IPM program for wheat. But obviously, there's a whole load of other stuff going on. So can you just give us an idea of what some of the other projects are that the other sectors are co-funding and being involved in?
Yeah, sure. So there, as you pointed out, there are many other sector groups testing biologicals as well, actually, for a variety of other reasons, including, loss of chemistry and market access issues. And in that space, particularly, there are other product groups working in biologicals like citrus, peas, beans, buttercup, squash, boysenberries, onions, and I think spinach, which is just fantastic. Like boysenberries is testing biological options with resistance management also being a key driver for them, and because they've identified real big issues with botrytis. So there's a lot of work in that space, but there's also work, for example, in the citrus space with beneficials and looking at planting beneficials to attract the beneficial pests to the crops to see if they can fight off the pests and diseases that we don't want in those crops. So there's a lot of other research programs being done, other cultural approaches, for example, using artificial intelligence in some fields to actually look for the diseases in certain areas of the field, I suppose, rather than just blanket spraying the entire field with one chemical, is actually approaching it from if the disease is in the top left-hand corner, let's just spray that area and not have to spray the rest of it. So there's a lot of different tools and techniques being tested from biologicals to beneficials to, actual innovation like AI and other things like that. So there's a whole summary PDF that I think your listeners could be interested in looking at that we've just produced, which is done by Pest and Disease, and it actually outlines all the projects that we've done. You can find that on the Lighter Touch website as well. So it's quite varied, the research, but the sharing of the knowledge is the key part in that space.
Yeah. And actually, that's a real nice segue into my next question, which is, you've got 16, plant sectors involved. And I know from past experience that when you have large numbers of partners involved in a program, it can be quite complex. It can be quite difficult to be able to integrate everyone together and actually make progress. What do you think the benefit of being part of a large pan-sector program is?
Yeah, I think you've hit it on the nail there. One of the best parts of this program is that collaboration between all 16 product groups. But, it is also one of the hardest things to manage, as you point out, because there are 15 different products basically that have different growing cycles or different needs, different pests and diseases, different size, product groups. So it's not easy to wrangle them all into one space. But the beauty with this particular group or grouping of industry product groups is that they've all got the same vision. And I think that's what links everybody together. And I think one of the most exciting things is everybody realizing that New Zealand's small. So, each individual product group has its own vision, I suppose, and what they need to achieve. But actually, if one of those product groups goes down, then the reputation of New Zealand as a fabulous food producing nation is at risk. And I think everybody has understood that, especially on a exporting market perspective, and has united around the fact that actually, if we're going to make steps forward, we need to make them together as a group. And so with that want from every angle of the industry, that actually makes our life a bit easier, bringing everybody together when they all understand there is a risk. If one product group, if the whole world is moving away from using harsh chemistry and 2 or 3 of our product groups are still not moving from it, that will actually potentially risk the entire industry of New Zealand. So working together like that and being on the same journey might take a bit longer because it is harder, much harder, but everybody appreciates that and is working together to make that happen. And I think one of the other really cool things that I've seen working here over the last 6 months is the unintended consequence of learning and supporting each other from the big organizations like FAR, and Zespri, who have got a huge amount of resources compared to some of the other smaller product groups, but are taking them on the journey and actually supporting them on the journey so they can be on that same journey than the big ones, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to afford it, to be bluntly honest. They just don't have resources.
It's interesting, Livia. You're talking about FAR being, one of the bigger sectors. We're never referred to as a big sector. Normally we're like the poor second cousins. But actually, because we have actually invested a lot into this program, I mean, it was something way back, 5 years ago when I came on board as the CEO. I mean, I recognized that this was something that we were going to have to invest in order to meet sort of, future consumer demands. And yes, we're putting in a reasonable amount of money. But the thing that, I constantly remind my growers is that we're getting a lot more out of the program than we're putting in. And you'll know this because I mentioned it the last time we spoke, that for every dollar that we are putting in of our, levy money, we're getting, 4 times as much R&D done that will benefit our growers. So we're putting in about $250,000. And when I look at all of the range of programs and projects that are going on, I can see, $1 million worth of research that's going on that will ultimately benefit our growers. And that's, and hopefully the other sectors are getting that sort of return on investment as well. They might be putting in a smaller amount of co-funding, but hopefully they're getting more back than they're putting on the table. And that to me is the value of, being together, is sharing resources, sharing sort of all the knowledge and the expertise and the tools and technologies that come out of the program.
100% agree with you. And they certainly are getting a lot from it. And, the smaller ones definitely so, because they wouldn't be able to go anywhere near this type of research with the current resources that they have. So it's wonderful to see the bigger organizations supporting the smaller ones on the journey. And it's that old saying, isn't it? If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go long, go together. And so this is a classic example of that happening in real life, and the value is absolutely multiplied for each and every product group because of that sharing of knowledge, sharing of the value that they're getting, and transferring of the knowledge. Like we had one project done by Summerfruit, or was it Citrus? I think it was Citrus, and the learnings from Citrus has now gone into a project for Summerfruit to extend out as well into their own demonstration, which is really exciting. And they would have started from scratch themselves if it hadn't been for Citrus doing that first project. So it really is saving money, I suppose, as well as adding value in that way.
So obviously you're nearly halfway through the program, and $27 million in 7 years. It sounds, oh my gosh, that's cheap. But the reality is, when you look at everything that we need to do, it's actually, quite challenging to be able to resource everything.
Yeah.
So realistically, what do you think? If you're drawing a picture of what success would look like at the end of 7 years, what's that going to look like for you as the program director?
Okay, so one of the biggest successes, I think, for this program is us seeing the shifts that we were talking about. So that shift of a lighter environmental touch on farm happening on farm. So we can't expect by 2027 that, everyone's growing with biologicals and beneficials and we don't have any or very little harsh chemistry left. But if we can absolutely see that the movement is there and that the growers are starting to lean into this approach a lot more and actually adopting either across their entire farm or in sections of their farm and growing in this new and more, environmentally friendly way for their whatever crops they're growing, that would be a huge success. So really seeing that adoption or that behavior change on farm for me would be huge. I mean, yes, it's fantastic having all of these researches and demonstrations and trials and tools there, but if they're all sitting on a shelf doing nothing, that's no success. We need them to be translated to on-farm shifts, which is a pretty big challenge, I think. And we're working through that one. So I think in terms of the projects themselves, every single one of them has value and is delivering value. So I think learning and sharing that knowledge of whether there's a success of a project or a failure, that's really important to share that knowledge. And growers lap that up. They want to know what's going on. What should they avoid? What should they try? That's actually going to help them in the long run. And some of these practices will help them, from a financial perspective as well. I heard a farmer recently needing to spray a lot less on his farm, which meant the tractor, the use of fuel, diesel going up and down with his tractor was cut quite considerably. But not only that, the use of actual chemicals on his property really reduced. So he was making more of a profit by shifting to more of these different types of approaches. So really exciting in terms of successes. But I think the key is to get that shift on farm.
And so, we've got, as I say, 3 years left. What are the biggest challenges that you're sort of experiencing at the moment with the program? Because, it's never going to, even if it was just one sector, trying to achieve one thing, it would be challenging. But obviously, a program like this with the complexity is, what are the sort of challenges that you're having to deal with?
Yeah, well, look, like anything, I think for any grower on any farm in New Zealand, one of the biggest challenges is the weather, right? So we've got all these wonderful plans, and projects being pulled together by fabulous researchers and scientists and growers alike. And then you've got the issues of weather hitting us, like the recent cyclone, which does then wipe out demonstrations or trials, and then we have to start again. So that is one of the challenges that we are facing, where we are trying to put in trials and the weather doesn't play ball, but it doesn't play ball with the entire industry. So we are just part of, what the industry is feeling in that way. So that is a challenge that we are very, very mindful of. And the other challenge continues to be what we were discussing before, which is how do we bring all 15 along? So we, in some ways we've cracked it, and in other ways we're still learning about how to make sure that we're all collaborating at different times of a project, whether it's scoping it together or monitoring the results as it's happening, or how do we share the knowledge at that tail end when the results have come in, whether they're good or bad. So that's another challenge that we're still continuing to learn and adapt and grow from. Speaking about various groups as well, one other challenge that I'm thinking about is continuing to ensure that we actually achieve what each product group came into this program to deliver. So again, with FAR, for example, there's a lot on resistance management in that space, but other product groups who are exporting, for example, have, the EU Green Deal, for example, screaming down their neck, basically saying we need to reduce our pesticide use by 50% by 2030. Otherwise, we won't be able to export into Europe, and let alone the fact that Europe actually leads the way in those sorts of regulations across the world will mean the rest of the world will start to adopt that same approach. So, market access, making sure that we achieve that for all of our growers who are exporting is another challenge. So that need or that pressure that's coming down the pipeline for whatever reason, and marrying that with actually getting adopted on farm, where growers, rightly so, can be quite risk averse from changing their behavior because this is their livelihood. So we've got to make sure that we find a way to minimize that risk in changing them to a more of an IPM approach, for example, et cetera, where they're comfortable in doing so, to then meet the pressures that are coming down the barrel at them as well. So there's quite a few different challenges, but working with everybody together is a real benefit to sharing in that challenge and trying to overcome it together.
So you mentioned that that we have Corteva and Syngenta as key strategic partners in the program. Now, obviously, there's a lot of other agrochemical companies and biological companies out there in New Zealand. How are we, trying to bring them into the program as well?
Absolutely. So we do not exclude any crop protection company anyway in our search for the best solutions for crop pest and disease management. The difference, I suppose, with Corteva and Syngenta is that they have chosen to really be at the forefront in this space and want to support as much as possible. So we do get a lot of information from them about what's happening globally in their business and what shifts are happening globally and products that they're building, I suppose, overseas that we may have of interest here in New Zealand. And because New Zealand's such a small country and a market, I suppose, for them, it's not that easy to penetrate into New Zealand. So that really helps us. But from a wider perspective in crop protection companies around New Zealand, we certainly reach out to them. We have great relationships with almost all of them. Our technical team are part of AtFans and make sure that we understand who's in the market and what they've got, so that when one of our product groups says, look, this is what we really need, from a biologicals perspective, we're able to reach out to the entire market to go, okay, who has what in this space and what can we trial? what's ready to be trialed, what's ready to be demonstrated. So we do very much keep in touch with all of them and make sure that we stay up to date with any new innovations that are out there.
Yeah, and I guess we also, are trying to support, the registration process
Oh, yes.
for biologicals, because, this is one of the issues that we have, is actually being able to bring some of these biologicals into New Zealand, particularly if they're, based on a microorganism that isn't known to occur in New Zealand. Then obviously there's quite a few hurdles that those companies have to get through. So, I mean, as much as we, are working with the chemical companies and the biological companies, we're also working with the government agencies, the regulatory agencies.
100%. There's a big part of our program which is about registration and understanding the issues, that have been there around registration of products. And unfortunately, COVID, from my understanding, hasn't helped, where a lot of the scientists or regulators who used to look over these requests or applications have gone back to, countries that they originated from. And so there's a lack of people actually here in New Zealand, which does mean a massive backlog at EPA that they're trying to work through. And so A Lighter Touch is working with EPA, looking at mapping out the entire process from where to go and putting in a couple of case studies, one of which is very much what you're talking about, bringing in an approach or an innovation that's never been looked at before here in New Zealand. And so there's no pathway for bringing in, for example, bee vectoring into the country. So looking at how do we actually make that happen and using that as a case study across the registration process to then, set a path for other innovations to come through that process. Because rightly so, it's not easy to get through because we have quite a unique environment here in New Zealand that we need to protect. But equally, we need to balance that with the ability to have biologicals or other products available to our growers when they need it, especially if things are coming off the shelf, we need something to replace it. That's equally, productive on the crop.
Absolutely. So I guess you've talked about the website, and I think of an arable grower they're probably reasonably familiar with what FAR has been doing in the lighter touch space, but arable farmers grow, a very wide range of different sort of vegetable, horticulture, arable crops. So what's the website name? And because you did mention earlier, which I think is a fantastic little resource, is where you've got a summary of all the projects that are being worked on. So if any of sort of FAR's levy payers want to know more about A Lighter Touch, where do they go?
Right. Well, they go very simply to the website alightertouch.co.nz. And on there, you'll see it's all been revamped, but you'll actually see all the projects listed, which is fantastic, as well as that PDF that I was talking about. And the beauty with that PDF is it's listed by pest and disease. So if you've got one of your growers has a certain pest or disease problem, all they need to do is run their fingers down and go, okay, that's my pest. Oh, look, they've done, let's say, for example, 3 different projects on that particular pest. This is what they've done it on. I'm interested to find out more. And in that space, you can actually connect with the person, who has been working on it to find out more information if you want to. So A Lighter Touch also has a newsletter called In Touch, which on the website on the front page you can register for, and that's a monthly newsletter. So we will be keeping everybody up to date with either the latest results, the latest trends globally or locally that we're seeing, information that might be of use, just anything in that sort of crop protection, disease management space that we think would help our growers think through different approaches as well as different events that they might be interested in attending. We'll list all of that sort of stuff out so they can network and absolutely stay up to date. So, yeah, absolutely register for the A Lighter Touch newsletter on our website.
Excellent. thank you very much, Liv. I mean, you've only been in the job 6 months, but it probably feels like 6 years. I mean, I know how hard you've been working. But yeah, I mean, I think the next 3 years is going to start yielding a lot of really good results and outputs. And I'm confident that the arable growers are going to start seeing a really good return on the investment that we've put into this program. So thank you very much for doing the podcast today.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure, Alison. All the best.
And thank you, listeners. Have a great day on the farm.
Thanks for tuning in to Cut the Crop, presented to you by FAR. If you'd like to know more about any of the topics discussed or have any suggestions for future topics, go to www.cutthecrop.co.nz.